going to talk about two policy issues. The first policy issue is the $8.5 billion that the FCC gives out annually. The FCC governs a fund called the Universal Service Fund, and that's non-appropriated money. $8.5 billion every year the FCC governs and gives out to advanced telco. The second one is between 2008 and 2010, we lost $13 trillion of wealth in the US. That was the housing crisis. And I had the opportunity to be involved in both of these policy issues, and I felt like it was worthwhile to tell some of the stories around them and some of the things we did. A colleague of mine has pointed out that the Ramones are technically proto-punk, not punk. I don't care. I just wanted to see my son on a 20-foot screen. This is Will when he was 2.5. And in the, one of the great places of punk in the US, DC has taught me a lot. What punk really tells us is ignore the noise. There are things out there that will distract you and take you on a path. And if you find yourself not focused on policy, not involving yourselves in the big questions of global warming, equity, education, healthcare policy, you're missing the boat. Punk reduced our message to exactly what I wanted to say when I wanted to say it. That's sort of concept one. Concept two about punk is that it was a DIY kind of function, right? 100% of the things that I'll show today were all done on a laptop or two, with no servers, no data warehousing, no map portal, all of the things that commonly people want to put in place as overhead in order to solve some big problem. That misses the boat entirely. We did stuff like in a meeting on a laptop, tried to get it to the actual policy decision. Plus, it's just kind of a badass photo, isn't it? So this was Mapbox map number 3 at the FCC. This was published February of 2012. I will probably spend about 5 minutes on this slide and cruise through everything else, because it is probably my favorite map. I actually made this. It is all 11 million census blocks cached with MB tiles on one MacBook Pro. We sat in the room with all of the lawyers who were writing the Connect America Fund rules in 2012, and they would say, hey, if we write the rules this way, how many people get broadband? I'd write some SQL on that laptop with Postgres, give them a number. They were like, okay, let's change the rule slightly, make it this way, give them a number. We were there 100% of the time, and we did this without data warehousing, any massive data infrastructure. It was really Postgres on a MacBook Pro. And after a while, through all these meetings, they said, well, what does it look like? Like, is it all of Nebraska and then like parts of Utah, and like what are the places that we're trying to get that $2.5 billion to? And I was like, oh, well, like, let's cache it. So we started caching it and making these Mapbox tiles. This was original MB tiles, so long tech stack ago. And so they would change their minds, and we would make a new map. And the only way we could really distribute this was that we created a GH Pages branch in GitHub, threw up some basic HTML that pointed to that MB tile set, changed the rules, recached tiles, changed them. When they came back, when they finally wanted the rule to go public, excuse me, I walked into the office that day, it was about 8:30, and I got a call from communications. They were like, hey, rule's going public today. Can you make sure that map goes out on the web? So I sat down in our CMS, this is no joke, sat down in our CMS, which was just brand new Drupal at the time. I opened up a new page, wrote iframe, embedded the GH Pages branch URL, pressed publish, called them back and said, yeah, it's up. No procurement, no data, live map. At 4 p.m. that day, Politico embedded the live map in Politico.com. The second part of that $2.5 billion was the mobility fund. This looked at all of the places that didn't have 3G. So we spent hours with the Wireless Bureau saying, same thing, like what are the rules? You know, how do we want to make sure that this fund gets to people that are going to get 3G out there? So they created this auction, and they wanted the auction focused on census blocks. So we took every wireless carrier, overlaid it, found the inverse of that space, the black areas, overlaid it with all 11 million census blocks, calculated every road mile in all of those places based on census data, published it out, and got this map. There were some challenges in that one. Again, done on a couple of MacBook Pros. Maps were cached with MB tiles again on MacBook Pros, and we got into a little bit of hot water on this one. The company that owns all of the boundaries of the wireless data was set up to publish a map service of the auction, given that they said they owned that data. So when we published this of the census blocks that lack 3G, they were like, hey, that infringes on our IP. And we're like, no, it doesn't. You can't reverse engineer the boundaries from our areas. So that took a little while to kind of flush through. When this went live, New York Times republished this that day as the live map in NewYorkTimes.com. Same kind of story. Given recent news, this map might read Florida Man. So we set up this framework with our enforcement division. It's not really a Mapbox map. It's more like our first foray into D3. What we did is we had the Enforcement Bureau goes out and enforces every pirate radio action in the US, sends truckloads of cease and desist letters, fines, all kinds of legal documents to all these people that are operating without a license. And they're like, we really want to show this. How do we do it? And we're like, well, what's your data backend? And they showed it to us. We're like, all right, just give us a CSV of that stuff. So we took the CSV again into GH pages, wrote some D3 around it. You'll notice I grabbed this screenshot, last night, 2 days ago. This map still exists. We started publishing this in 2012. Still exists, still framework. It's the exact same piece of code. It hasn't changed in 8 years. It's kind of cool. I'm going to skip over the next 2 slides because I really want to get to the second policy area. This map is wicked cool for a whole bunch of reasons, but I don't have time to share the story. Everything we did on fcc.gov/maps is still there. Still in the same Mapbox original MB tiles framework from 2012. No software upgrade, right? No change of license, no re-engineering. It's all still there. That's pretty cool. Second big policy area. Again, I'll throw that number around again. We lost $13 trillion between 2008 and 2010. Really because of the mortgage crisis. This data, being collected since 1976, is more or less a census on every mortgage application in the US. It is public data. It is also entirely paper, right? The data that comes in to the Fed and that gets published was really PDFs. A guy in this room, Seth is back here somewhere, Seth, was instrumental in constructing this page. The talk I'm going to give is not about this page. It's about something a friend of mine and I did over Christmas one weekend with this data. So we took all, 500 million rows of data between 1990 and 2014, again, in a laptop or two, and started combing through it to see if we could see any patterns. The basic question I wanted to answer was, did we know? Did we know there was going to be a crash? This is all public data, public asset. Anyone can download it, read it. It's pretty arduous. You've got to have some technical chops to do it. But was it all there? Did the story tell us? So, common tool, GH pages. There's a URL up there. We took all 500 million rows, outputted 10 to 20,000 little JSON objects to create some timeline stuff. And this is the number of mortgage applications filed between 1990 and 2014. So you're bouncing around over those first 10 years, and then 2003, it goes up to 41 million applications. It's a lot of mortgages. That kind of seems like more than the past 10 years, right? This is that exact same data, same timeline, 1990 to 2014, but this is the dollar amount of those mortgage applications. So the first 10 years bounces between $1 trillion and $3 trillion, and then between 2001 and 2005, it goes from $2.5 trillion to $6.2 trillion in mortgage applications. That seems to be a market shift, right? Something's going on here. So here is the disposition of mortgages that are only home improvement loans. Looks kind of curious, very similar, right? Volume of mortgages, volume of applications that are home improvement loans between 1990 and again that same period, 2002. Yeah, you got this weird blip over there. Maybe there's a crash, maybe there's a correction, but I can't really see a really discernible pattern other than the crash, right? What happened in 07 on. This next slide is that exact same disposition, home improvement loans, but the dollar amount. Public data. Loaded into Postgres, summarize. I literally did select count star. So what happened here, for 13 years, there's basically, $20 billion in home improvement loans. And then in 2003, it goes to over $1 trillion. That's because people were getting loans at 95.5, and then 20% home improvement on top of that in origination with no down, no job, no justification. That's a new product that brought us down in public data. We knew. This data was really made to look at the disparities in lending patterns. Bottom right, these are the patterns over those same years of single family origination. It's like I go buy a house to live in for white people. Up here, single family originations for black people. Curves are almost identical. The Y value is slightly different. Maybe you can justify the Y value difference between population. So about 55% of the population, about 13% of the US population, right? That seems justifiable. Here's the same curves for denials. I go to buy a home, I'm white, I'm denied at this rate over those same 15 years. I go to buy a home that I'm going to live in, I'm black, this is the denial rate for those people. Again, Y value is different. Perhaps population takes care of that given the percent population of blacks and whites in the US. So I thought it interesting to make a ratio of these. What's the ratio of originations to denials for blacks versus whites? That's the difference. So you're 2 times more likely in the US to get a home loan if you're white than if you're black. That seems like a pretty mass disparity. This is not corrected for income or anything else, but it's systemic over a 25-year period. Public data, you can go crunch. I did this over a Christmas weekend on a MacBook Pro. Again, I just really wanted to see Will on a 20-foot screen. This is him getting his driver's license last Monday. I had been accused of being a Svengali dad by dressing him in a Ramones t-shirt. He chose this himself. The point is, if you ever find yourself in an argument about what library to use, what the best tech stack is, those sorts of things, you're in the wrong room. You need to be in a room that is arguing about how are we solving global warming, how are we solving education disparities, how are we getting healthcare to people. You as technologists in government have every opportunity to publish that. All of the things I showed you today did it with zero effort or near zero effort. So thank you very much. My time is up. I'm Byrne Tweets. Appreciate your time today.